Welcome back to the Context Coaching Podcast. We are joined today by new head football coach at Aptos High School, Zach Hewitt. After a second game, I was able to get him on today, so we're going to dive into what we've learned right off the bat here. But, Coach, thanks for joining us today. Excited to have a little conversation.
Yeah, man. Glad to do this. I don't know how much value people will get, but we'll see.
They're going to get a ton of value because you got 6 years as the track and field coach head plus a whatever 10 15 other years coaching, and now you're stepping into a new role, so it's the perfect time to have this conversation. So with that, why
Yeah.
don't you help us ground the audience a little bit in who you are, how'd you get here, or the
Yeah.
steps along the way?
Yeah, man. This goes way back. So I went to Aptos High. I graduated from here in 2003. And I knew that I wanted to get into coaching real early while I was in high school. And it was the thing, as for so many coaches, where I had these mentors and role models that were so important and influential to me that nothing else really seemed to make sense. Where these people are so influential to me, I want to be that person for other people. And I know just with my personality, I would be awful at a lot of jobs. It doesn't really jive with me anyways. But so I knew that I wanted to get into teaching and coaching before I even graduated high school. And with football, I was always very fascinated with the X's and O's of the whole thing. And so I got out of Aptos. I went to Willamette University. I played ball up there for 2 years. I was hurt pretty much the whole time. And after basically 2 years of trying to rehab an injury to my hip and just no real progress, I think I'm just going to get into a high school coaching. And so I started coaching at a school up there. I learned a lot about what not to do, probably the best way to put it. And so I finished my degree up there, came back home, started coaching at Aptos, coached at Aptos for a couple years. And I think it was the fourth year that I was at Aptos, we hired a man named Randy Blankenship, which anybody that has played for, coached with, or probably coached against understands that Coach Blankenship is a singular force of nature. And at that time in my life, I was not ready to work for him. It's probably like I was young, I was headstrong, and we butted heads constantly, and it just wasn't going to work at that time in my life. And so I left Aptos. I was at Gilroy High. I was at Piedmont Hills High School, where I got to coach with my uncle, and that really was a really great thing for me because I loved getting to spend that season. I was living with them, I was coaching with them. It was really great. And then I found my way to Salinas High, where I got to coach under Steve Goodbody. And that staff was like a cradle of coaches, because it was me, Steve Zank, my second year there. Alex Bisall was there. Juan Cuevas from North Monterey County was there. Brad Mendes, who's the DC at Salinas and was the head coach at Alvarez for a couple of years. There was a bunch of really good dudes there. I really treasured my time at Salinas High. But then Coach Blankenship, my goal was always to come back to Aptos. And Coach Blankenship went into partial retirement. Job came open here, and I threw my hat in the ring, and I was lucky enough to get hired back here to teach weight training. And so I've been here for I got hired in January 2015. I'm not great with the calendar math. So I was coaching JV. I was the JV head coach for about 9 years before taking over in January of this year. And yeah, man, it's been a journey. Been through all kinds of different situations and seasons at this point, and I haven't even been doing it that long. Yeah, that I guess that's the short version, but it doesn't seem that short.
Give me the quick rundown on the track and field piece as well, because I'm going to want to dive into that background as well.
Okay, so I did track when I was at Aptos, and I was a very good thrower, shot put and discus. And the head track coach when I was here was a man named Mark Dorfman. You got to know Coach Dorfman. And Dorf is one of my longtime mentors, and it's really a privilege to say friends now. But I never really had any designs on being a head track coach. I like coaching track. Coaching shot put and discus was a lot of fun for me. It's very different from football because track is a lot more. You're just looking for PRs and improvement, and football is so intense, and track is not that way. And Coach Dorfman was looking to get out of being the head coach, and he comes to me one day and he says, "I think you should be the head track coach." And I was like, "I've never thought about this at all." And he laid out why he thought I'd do a good job. And it's one of those things where I was like, "Okay, I don't know, can I sleep on it?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure." So we talked about it, and I thought about it, and I was really like, I think this would be a good thing for me. No, I think I can do this. I think I can do this. And it was also for me, training wheels in case I ever got the varsity job here, where I wanted that experience. And it was something that went really well. We have a very strong track legacy at Aptos High. And so a big part of it was I just took the playbook that Coach Dorfman gave me and I found ways to make it my own. And in a lot of ways, that's what I'm doing right now with football. Is the same thing, where I got to spend so much time around Coach Blankenship that I've learned I don't even know how much I've learned from him. And so a lot of it is taking the things that he taught me and doing it my way. And so track, I think we lost 1 or 2 dual meets in 6 years. Of the 10 league titles, we got 7 of them between the boys and the girls. My last year, we swept every division of the boys and girls. So we won the varsity boys, varsity girls, boys, JV girls, and we had all 4 of the meet MVPs at the league finals. And that was a really cool year. Just had a really great team. And it was a thing where, I stepped down from that because I was super burned out because of I was just on year round, because I'd go through track season would end and then spring football would start like immediately. And then jump into summer training for football, and then it's football season ends and I take about a week and then I'd start getting ready for track season. And after 6 years of that, I was just like, okay, I need to say no to something. And that was a big thing, because like earlier in my career, I was going out of my way to say yes to everything. So at one point I was our Saturday school coordinator. I was just trying to pick up responsibility and be somebody that was like important to campus. And I wanted people to trust me and I wanted to develop those relationships and things. And more, I realized I got to start saying no to some stuff. And so eventually I had to say no to track. And it's the thing that I felt really good about where the program was, to where I could step away, and Travis Fox stepped into the role and he's done a great job with it too. And it was a really great thing. And it's something that I really enjoyed. And I could see myself coaching track again at some point, because it's a really special experience. Like it's very different from football. And I like that in a lot of ways.
Yeah, for sure. Totally different vibe in regards to intensity at times. And
Mm-hmm.
but I think it's a good balance, and there's probably a lot of crossover athletes. But let me go back to this. So you had great mentorship all along the way. You've been a head coach.
Mm-hmm.
You've been able to fumble and learn. You've been a JV head coach. You left, gone other places, come back, and now you're the head football coach. What did you realize right away that you still needed to figure out, even though you had all of those experiences? And now that we're two weeks into the season proper, you might even
Yeah.
have some more ideas that you're working through. But in theory,
Yeah.
I bring this up, Coach, because we all think we're ready, but we're never ready. So I'm trying to like tease this out for people that listen.
For
Maybe it's
sure.
something they hadn't thought about.
And that's the thing, is that if you want to be a head coach, you have to be okay understanding that like you are not ready, you're not going to be ready, and you're going to learn a lot on the way. I knew that this first year is going to be really hard. And part of that was from track, because the first year of track was just constantly a thing of being like, oh, what? That's my problem now too? Okay. And it was like, oh, what's your system for dealing with this now? So like track is, what's your system for inventory, where you're handing out the uniforms, you're handing out the warm-up suits, what's your system going to be? And I would say that one of the biggest pains this year has been inventory so far. Just having a system for inventory where things were organized. And I would say a mistake I definitely made that I would not make again is I tried to, because I had some TAs that were like good TAs and fairly responsible kids, and I tried to rely on them to help me with some of the inventory stuff. And really, I just needed to take care of it myself. Like I tried to like offload, delegate that one, and I should have just been doing that myself. Because then we're in August all of a sudden, and I'm up in the loft up here that you can see, and I'm digging through, and I'm like, where the frick are the rest of the JV, whatever. And so that was one thing. The inventory has been a pretty big pain this year. But like I said, and you touched on it, that like you got to just own that you're not ready. You just be comfortable with that and embrace that, because it's going to be more true than you can possibly imagine. And like I said, I spent probably, I don't know, 200 plus days a year around Coach Blankenship for 9 years. right? Like I spent a ton of time with him, and there's still plenty where I'm like, oh, hey, like I didn't realize that. You know what I mean? And it's not that he was not a good mentor. He's a very effective mentor. But it's just there's all these things that you don't realize and you don't know. And you resolve to do it better next time is like one of the things. And it's like you have to be okay with that. And it's like a kind of a vulnerable thing. Like they say, one of the better things you can tell somebody is, I don't know, but I'll go find out. Right. And there's plenty of stuff where it's, I don't know, but I'm gonna have to find out.
Which is probably easier for you now than it was 15 years ago, right? When you said you were stubborn, you thought you had all the answers, right? But now,
Oh yeah.
even in your first head football job, you've been a head coach before, you realize the power of being vulnerable and say, I have no idea. Let me figure this one out, which probably wouldn't have happened had you got this job 9 years ago, right? So talk a little bit about some of the things that you didn't know that you had to find out over the last couple of months as we are still in the midst of learning on the fly.
Everybody, you probably hear this one a lot of like, you teach things to other people really forces you to actually confront, how well do I really know this stuff? Because I consider myself fairly well learned in terms of defensive football. I spent 9 years learning offense with Coach Blankenship, but like at the same time, I'm still learning defense. But it's a thing where there's a lot of stuff that I've realized that I intuitively understand that I now have to verbalize to other people and articulate those thoughts. And I think I'm a pretty good communicator. I was an English major in college. I added my PE credential on afterwards, but I was an English major. So I think I'm a pretty clear communicator. But it's still a thing where over the course of the spring football and the summer and preseason and all of that stuff, there's plenty of things where I know and I understand like how I want things to go, but I realized that I could have done a better job teaching that to the assistants, to our players, right? And it's just, and again, it's one of those things where I'm gonna do that better in the spring next year. And you got to just be okay with that and have a little grace with yourself where it's, yeah, this is the first time through trying to teach these concepts to these guys. And in that meantime, it's just, okay, let's correct it. Let's do it again better. Right.
So on that note, how much, let's call it change, are you having to manage, right? Because you worked for Coach for 9 years. You did some defensive stuff. I read somewhere in a interview you did, I think, that said, look, we're still going to lean on the wing tee. We're still going to do some of these things that he brought with him from NU. And so like, how much change are you managing versus observing this year, trying to do some things the same, realizing maybe it's not authentic to who you are? Talk a little bit about that process, things that were intentional and maybe some things that you're falling into that you hadn't planned on doing because of that.
Yeah. And so I think I'm really lucky in that we're continuing with our offense because I believe in it. And I think that it suits our athletes. It's done really well for us. Like we're continuing with that, not out of a desire to like not rock the boat too much or anything like that, but I really believe in it. Defensively, we're doing some different stuff on defense. And that is one of those things where this is more authentic to me and what I believe in and what I want to do. Right. And so you make those changes. But if like wing tee is very much like an old school thing, and I joke about being like a aficionado of like caveman football, because in this era where people are throwing the ball a bunch in high school football, it looks wildly different than even the 20 years ago when I played. But I was coming in and my background was air raid and running a different defense. You got to rip the Band-Aid. Even though in maybe you look for situations more where it's like, hey, this is very much like what you did previously. So you can build off of the experiences that the kids do have already. But if you're going to make changes, just make them. Like one of the things that we've done this year is we have changed the terminology in our offense. And that is partly that was my own desire. I wanted to do that. But then the coach that's calling our offensive coordinator, Coach Morin, he has a lot of great ideas. And he came with a whole system of, I want to call the formations this way, I want to call the plays this way. And he had a whole plan. And I was just like, yeah, I'm mostly aligned with this. So run with it. This is pretty close to the direction that I wanted to move. And I trust you that you're going to do a great job because he's a great coach. And yeah, man, let's jump in with both feet.
So talk about that decision to trust and to delegate and how your years as a track coach informed your ability to let go of some things, right? But also your years as an assistant, right? Talk about how both of those experiences informed your ability in that moment to say, yeah, I'm in alignment with it, go, versus
Yeah.
feeling like in year one, you got to micromanage everything.
Yeah. So it is interesting because being a JV football coach here and being like a head track coach, very polar opposites in a lot of ways, where there's a lot of times in JV football where I was the only one out there because you've got assistants that have got jobs, they've got conflicts, those kinds of things. And so sometimes, especially during the summer, like I'm doing everything. Right. And so there's a micromanaging principle to it that you just have to have. Right. But track, like you can't micro in track because even though they're like, for example, even though they're both jumping exercises, okay, long jump and high jump have almost like no correlation to one another, like in terms of like technical stuff. And so you've got to be confident in identifying people where it's like, hey, like I got to trust you that you're gonna coach this event, you're gonna coach it well. And I you have to give people an opportunity to show their quality unless you don't have to unless you are comfortable being like no, like I'm going to run the show until you prove to me that you can do it, which is definitely one way that you can approach it. But for myself, I'm much more of a, well, I'm going to see what you got, and then I'm going to try to give you support and resources. And so Coach Morin and I, he helped. So he came into our program 2 years ago, coaching O-line with kind of the JV and the varsity. And then he and I were coaching throws together, shot put and discus. And I knew he was a good coach from football already. And then watching him coach the throws in track, I was like, oh, he's a really good coach. And I was like, oh yeah. And so it's one of those things where just through constant conversations and just the things that he does, he's awesome, man. I have so much respect for Coach Moore and the way that he does stuff. Like he does a lot of great stuff. And so it was really easy when push came to shove to be like, yeah, man, like I have full trust in you. The offense is your baby. Make it good. Right. Because he had just done so many things and proved his quality so thoroughly. And it's not like he was trying to prove it to me. He's just coaching. And it was just like, man, this guy's awesome. He's really sharp, really with it.
Yeah, and it probably makes it a whole lot easier when you have people that have proven themselves in whatever way that is needed. And it's different at every place, but where you have enough faith and trust that you can hand that piece off and focus on the overarching management, or I think you said you're calling the defense, whatever it might be. But
Yeah.
it's delegation is something that is a learned skill, just like creating clear role definition is a learned skill, right? And these are all the things that you pick up along the way as we fumble through them at other stops. Let me ask this, and you could do whatever you want with it, but what I want to know is what's the best thing you do in your program that you think has the largest ripple effect on your culture, and meaning that were you to leave tomorrow, it would come with you regardless of sport, discipline, role, etc. Right? So something that maybe you learned as a kid, something maybe you picked up at Piedmont Hills or at Salinas or whatever, but it's something that like it's part of who you are to the level that it's something that happens regardless of what sport you're coaching, and something that you can offer others as a really transformational way to impact your group.
Yeah. I don't know. My mind goes to a couple different places. I will say that for a while now, and more so every additional year that I coach, it becomes more and more important to me to coach the whole person and to make sure that the kids that I'm coaching understand that ultimately our goal is like sports are a vehicle for growth and development as a person. And like that's our long-term win. That's been something that I just, every year it feels more and more important to me. And that's not like a low society these days or anything like that, but just I think it's a me maturing kind of thing where it's like the wins are great, but like the relationships that you build and the way that the kids grow and develop within that, and like pointing out those things to them, because sometimes they don't realize it, where they don't realize how much they have internalized the idea that like delayed gratification is important. as an example, right? Like track kids work hours and hours on like minute details to shave a tenth of a second off of a time and PR. And sometimes you got to point it out to them about, hey, do you understand like how working like this is going to set you up for success in the rest of your life? And really trying to call out and focus on we have sports at Aptos High, not to glorify Aptos High and not to get you scholarships. Although if those things happen, cool, right? But really, this is an extended part of the curriculum that we offer. This is going to teach you something that you will not get in the classroom. There's no way. There's no content in any discipline that I've encountered so far that's going to teach a kid about self-sacrifice, really. You know what I mean? About putting a team before themselves. And like, I don't think that you can harp on that stuff enough.
Like, how do you do that intentionally? So I hear you. You can't harp on it enough. And you said something that I say all the time: sports is the vehicle. You said to growth. I say to teach leadership, to teach followership, and to learn to be part of something bigger than yourself. So do you have tools you can offer other coaches that specifically focus on that? For example, we do something with my basketball group where I sit them all down, give them a piece of paper, and have them write down how many minutes everybody should play. And then obviously there's 160 minutes in the game, and you total it up and they're at 245. And that doesn't work. You have to whittle it down. Coach, that means everybody can't play. That's correct. How do you, right? Do you have tools or some anecdotes or some specific things that you've leaned on over the years to talk about self-sacrifice, right? To talk about role definition and starring in your role versus and training for the one that you have, right? Or the one that you want. Anything to offer there that maybe somebody could use and steal and then get those same outcomes that you've been able to get organically?
One thing that we're doing with the football program is every player in our program has a composition book. And like right now during the season, it's like, all right, here's the scouting report. I want you to write down these things that are pertinent to your position. But in the off season, we're doing at least weekly lessons on, I was pulling a bunch of stuff out of Extreme Ownership in the spring by Jocko Willink, where trying to talk about some of the most important themes in that book, trying to connect it to here is a football example of extreme ownership and like where you've got to do this thing. And then trying to create situations where like I give them like a topic and have them talk and leave them alone, like not guiding the conversation, letting the conversation go. And sometimes I give them 5 minutes, and 2 minutes in, they've exhausted everything they have to say about it. And it just turns into, yo, you guys going to beat Salinas. But sometimes you do see like rich conversations happening, like you said, organically. And I in those moments, I think that is terrific. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the kids to keep the same notebook for 4 years. That's the big picture of if they would keep the same notebook for 4 years, where they've got 4 years worth of football memories, to be honest, but then also like topics and information that we think is important about being a good person, being a good teammate. What do these things look like? And that's a big picture, long-term thing that we want is these freshmen, ideally, they have the same notebook when they leave our program. And even just that, I've heard sophomores from our sophomores this year that were freshmen in the spring, I've heard them use words and phrases that I have put into those. And so I can tell that it's being absorbed. Good. And that was a really cool thing for me, where hearing kids use phrases that I specifically use. And I was like, all right, like this is happening.
Yep. And that goes back to what you said earlier about vocabulary or terminology, I think you said. And so how are you cataloging these lessons that are second nature for you that you get to refer back to, right, at some point? But on that, right, so then what have you learned watching other teams? And the world has become a place of specialists, unfortunately, and we are like one of the last bastions of the multi-sport athlete down here. And so my soapbox is always trying to push people to encourage and almost make their kids do other things. And so I always ask this question from a standpoint of, okay, you can't talk about what you learn from watching other football coaches or track for you. What about some of these other sports? What have you been able to take away and implement to your own discipline?
We're really lucky that like our athletics program here expansive. Like we offer, I think we offer the most athletic programs in our county. We have a really strong, wide ranging athletics program. And so there's a lot going on. And I find, I don't know, I'm probably going to get booed out of the football club for this, but I find soccer fascinating sometimes. Okay. Because I think there's a lot to learn from aspects of soccer practice that are not being picked up in the same way. So like in basketball is another fair one where because the small-sided games, right? Where it's a microcosm of the bigger picture and you're setting the game up to look like to work on like a specific skill or something, that kind of thing, right? And like in basketball, maybe you're working 4-on-3 and you're trying to set it up to encourage them to get a trap somehow, right? But the use of small-sided games is something that I am fascinated by, with like how do I get that to show up in football, right? And I think there's so much to learn from things like that. Where another concept is that one of our soccer coaches we had a gal, Jess Perkin, that was a really great soccer coach. She was in her own athletic career, she played for the U.S. national team at one point. She's an incredible soccer player. And she would have captain's practices where the captains were in charge. And I was like, man, that's a wild idea. And then I remember connecting it one time to, I wasn't in the program at this point, but allegedly Coach Blankenship had the quarterback take take the team down to the field and install a couple plays with no coaches there. And I was like, man, that's such a flex of, I believe in you guys so much.
To your point, I ask my football coaches this every year. As a basketball coach, it's, hey, when's the last time you started practice playing 11 on 11?
Mm-hmm.
What are you talking about? Yeah, hey, first 10 minutes, we're going live. And it's usually you're building up from small stuff to bigger stuff, right? Especially in football where everything is so compartmentalized.
Yeah.
And in basketball, we're playing small-sided games. We'll start practice 5-on-5 and then teach from there. But it's like, how have you tried some of these things that you've observed? What have you done that's outside the box? And it was like, that didn't work. Or actually, that was really good.
Yeah. I think you got to be willing to do that too. That you try something and you're like, no, that was better in my head. And I end up with that a lot in like tackling drills, where I'll have an idea for a tackling drill and I'll be like, okay, let me think this through as well as I can, and then let's implement it. And I'm like, nope, that was bad. But yeah, even just you saying that, I'm like, I've literally never started practice with 11 on 11.
I don't think you'll find a football coach in America that's done it because it's not something you do.
We're doing that next week.
But it's like, how can you, as a coach, or me as a coach, or other people as a coach, look at the other sports and go, why don't we try that? It may be a complete and utter debacle, or it may be like Vance, where he totally changed the game of basketball by deciding to play dribble drive. So it's like, how do you get creative, to your point, to have some fun and to do some things? And even if you're worried about setting it up so it's not a failure, you even tell the kids, hey, we're going to do a 15-minute period here and we're just going to try something. And at the end of the day, we're going to have some fun and I don't know what's going to come out of it. And it's, Jimmy, you're the quarterback on that team. Mike, you're over here. You're calling all the plays. Everything is no huddle. You're not allowed to do it. And it's like, what happens? Who knows? It might be a complete and utter dumpster fire. It might be the best thing you ever figure out. But it's like, how do we challenge our own assumptions to try new things?
And I think that when you do that and it does work out, in my experience, it's usually something where, oh, this is good. Last season, I took a tackling drill that I have done for, I don't know, 6-7 years. And it's usually, spacing wise, the total framework of the drill takes 10 yards. And I was thinking about it and we shrank it down to 5 yards. And the impact is less. So it's not like a bang drill. The impact is less, but the mental intensity and processing required to do the drill is much greater. And so it stresses them in a mental, like, processing kind of way, in a much stronger way than like the action of tackling, right? And it's one of those things where it's, yeah, no, this is good. This is a really good tool to have in the box, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's where we always want to push the needle on trying to figure it out and make the stuff fun for the kids. So I'll come back to this when we're off wax on my other football thought that's probably completely insane, but I'll share it with you after we get done.
So I will tell you, we used to have a volleyball coach here, a guy named Jonah Carson, that is was a really really deep thinker, really intelligent guy. And he was jogging laps around football practice one day, and I was just coaching defense. And I look over, and he's just watching our practice. And it was like an offensive time, and I didn't really have anything to do. So I went over, and I'm just like, "Hey, man, what you seeing right now?" And I'm gonna be honest, football practice has got to be the most inefficient thing I've ever seen. We had a 10-minute conversation there, and I was just like, "Man," he's like, "Why do you have your best players going against some of your backups right now?" And I was like, well, the starters need to get working. He's like, wouldn't it be better if half of the starters went against the other half of the starters and half of the backup? And he was just taking me through it. And now that I'm having this memory and I'm making myself think. But it was, yeah, right. But it was a 10-minute conversation, if that. But it was one of those things where just him watching football. And it's what you're talking about, right? Learning from other sports, him watching football, he's just, this is so inefficient.
That's one of the best things that Golden will tell you he's ever done is he had a long-time mentor that was a tennis coach that would just come out and watch practice. And it was all about the dialogue and the conversation around growth and what somebody sees through a different lens. And I don't think we do that enough in sports. We're in our niche and our discipline, and that's where we go for advice and like, how are we thinking outside the box a little bit? Let me ask two kind of combo questions here. And one you've already discussed a little bit, but I'd love to maybe get you in the weeds on it. How has your coaching approach changed over the years? And the second piece of that is, what have you most recently changed your mind on? And by that, meaning I used to be dug in over here and now I'm over here, which is the complete opposite. And here's why. And both of them are really growth mindset questions, but ways in which we can identify, yeah, actually, this is where I've grown and the why, and what I'm doing now.
Okay, so has coaching changed during the career? Like for myself.
And on that approach, and you can answer however you want, but really it's about how's your approach changed?
My players won't believe this, but I yell a lot less now. I'm one of those people. I'm gifted with a very loud, powerful voice, so you
sound like you're yelling even when you're talking. It's okay.
Sometimes I'm not that guy that's 6 inches away and projecting at you, but if I want to be loud, I will be heard. But I'm a better teacher now. I'm better at teaching in the day job, as I'm a better teacher now, and I'm a better teacher as a coach now, right? And a lot of that comes through, like, how do you get better at anything? You struggle, right? You struggle and you have to work at things and you have to improve and you have to learn. And when I was a lot younger, I didn't have the box of tools that I think I do now. And I know that I do a better job just teaching things now. And
there's probably an intentionality, if I can interrupt you, Coach, on teaching versus doing activity as we get older. When we're young coaches, we do a lot of activity, but what are we really teaching?
Yeah, 100%. And the other part of it is, I think I'm more empathetic towards, and not that I don't know. I think empathetic is probably the best way to put it, in that it's easier for me to understand now when kids do things that I don't approve of, or things where I'm like, I don't understand what you're doing here. I have more empathy for my players. And again, I think that's a maturity thing, where before I was a lot more strict and severe, and I still am about certain things, but it's one of those things where I'm much more understanding now. And I think that's helped me to build good relationships with my athletes. I think that's a big part of it. And then in terms of changing my mind,
and this is more, I want to frame this one too. It doesn't have to be about coaching.
Yeah.
It could be, like in my case, about parenting. It could be about being a teacher. It could be about how you drive your car. Who knows? But it's more about, like, the world has become so polarized and everybody is in their echo chamber, that how are we actively striving to learn enough about something to potentially change our mind? And so what is that for you and why?
And a big one for me has been learning. So I read a ton. Like, bookshelf over there full of stuff. And because I was an English major, so like one of my primary ways of interacting with like information and knowledge is I'm going to read about it. And I've been doing a fair amount of reading about the constraints-led approach and the way that we like physically learn and stuff like that. And for a while, like I was like, no, there's like a proper technique and technical. And I'm a lot more now, all right, I'm going to set up this drill and I'm going to see if they can figure it out. You know what I mean? Where I'm going to let them try to figure it out. And if they're not figuring it out, I'm going to change the drill. I'm going to change the thing. I'm trying to set up a lot more situations where it's not that I'm saying, no, you took the wrong step. You used the wrong footwork there, that kind of thing. It's now like, you're going to do what your body is capable of doing. And I'm going to try to give you tools to work in that way. And I'm going to try to set up drills that force you to do these things in a way that I think is better, but you're going to figure it out. And I know that constraints-led approach has a lot more to it than that, but I'm summarizing.
I had a conversation with one of my coaches the other day where I told them essentially there's such a thing as overcoaching.
Yeah.
Like, you
Yeah.
don't have to coach every swing. You can let it go.
I used to be a feedback every play kind of guy. And I'm just less so now, where it's, I don't know, do I have to tell him something every single play? And the same with throwers, where coaching throwers is a really good example. Sometimes I don't give them feedback as much as I'm like, how'd that one feel? What were you trying to do on that one? What were you thinking? And so it's not necessarily feedback, it's getting insight into them.
100%. Let me wrap with this just so you throw him a bone and he might appreciate it. What's the best thing you've learned from Foxy since you've been working for him? Is there even anything there?
No, man, he's doing a great job. I really enjoy working with him. We have a really good relationship, and I was on the committee to hire him, and it was one of those things where I was like, I like this guy. I want this guy. He's going to do a good job.
But something maybe you find yourself saying to your own kids, right? That was like, oh, that was from that conversation.
And the thing that I really appreciate about Travis the most is he does a really great job of he brings things back to what's best for kids. Like he really does a good job with that, of coming back to, yeah, this kid is being difficult and like we're struggling with this kid, but what's best for the kid? In high school sports, you have to do that at the end of the day. What's best for the kid? What's best for kids? And like you keep that front and center and you'll always be doing right.
No doubt. And that's something that we always try to point us back to is how do you keep the kid at the center of the equation and not let adult problems get in the way? I appreciate taking the time today. You got a big one tonight. Good luck. Hopefully, continue to learn and grow.
Yeah, indeed.